I can still hear the echo of my sister's words bouncing off the glass walls of that conference room. This company needs sharper talent, not family hand-me-downs. Just like that, my 10 years of work, loyalty, and late nights became disposable. I stood there for a second, palms pressed against the polished oak table, staring at Amelia, my older sister, my boss, my so-called partner. She looked at me the same way she looked at outdated hardware, something that had served its purpose. The room smelled faintly of citrus and coffee, the kind they ordered for high-profile meetings. It was supposed to be a routine strategy session. Instead, it became my public execution. She sat at the head of the table, chin slightly raised, her voice steady as she told the board I was being let go. Behind her, our parents sat like ornaments, faces stiff, eyes avoiding mine. 22 senior executives, people I'd hired, trained, and defended, watched the whole thing. No one said a word. Not even my father, who used to say I had the business instincts of the family. He just folded his hands and stared at the table. My mother's eyes flickered with something like guilt, but she stayed silent. Amelia gave me 5 minutes to clear my desk. 5 minutes to erase a decade of my life. I should have cried, maybe yelled, maybe reminded her that without me, Phoenix Digital wouldn't exist. But instead, I smiled. A calm, deliberate smile. "Thank you," I said. 2 words that made her blink, just for a second. She wasn't expecting gratitude. She was expecting me to crumble. I walked out of that luxury boardroom in San Francisco's financial district with my head high, the sound of my heels echoing across the marble floor. I could feel 22 pairs of eyes on my back, heavy with pity, curiosity, maybe even relief. I didn't look back. If I had, I might have seen the smirk spreading across Amelia's face, the same one she wore every time she thought she'd won. As I packed up my office, a strange calm came over me. I slid files into a box, unplugged my laptop, and took down the framed photo of us from the company's early days, 2 sisters in hoodies, standing in a cluttered garage in Palo Alto, soldering wires and dreaming big. She used to call me the quiet genius. Back then, I believed her. I believed that she saw me as an equal. But somewhere along the way, the quiet genius became the family hand-me-down. We'd grown up in a family that treated success like oxygen. You either breathed it or suffocated. Our parents ran a small electronics store near El Camino Real. When Amelia took over, she rebranded everything, turned it into a sleek tech consultancy, and named it Phoenix Digital. Within 5 years, she transformed our little shop into a multi-million-dollar company. She was the visionary, the face of the brand, the one giving interviews to TechCrunch and Forbes. I was the one making sure the servers didn't crash, the clients didn't walk, and the employees didn't quit. And honestly, I didn't mind being behind the curtain. I liked solving problems, building systems, and letting her have the spotlight. But the more successful she became, the smaller I became in her eyes. My title, Operations Director, started to sound like a courtesy. Decisions were made without me. My name was left off press releases. My ideas were credited to her. And every time I tried to bring it up, she'd smile that patronizing smile and say, "You're the heart of the company, Sophia. You keep things running. Translation, stay in your lane." So when she fired me, part of me wasn't surprised. I just didn't expect her to do it in front of everyone. That was the part that stung, the performance of it. The way she turned my dismissal into a statement of strength for the board. It wasn't about business. It was about dominance. I took my box of things, just a few notebooks, my plant, a framed quote that said, "Build quietly, let success make the noise," and walked out. The receptionist, Lauren, looked up at me, eyes wide, clearly having heard the news already. "Sophia," she started, but I cut her off with a smile. "It's okay," I said. "Really?" Then I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the lobby, and let the doors close. When I reached the parking garage, I sat in my car for a long minute before turning the key. The air was heavy with exhaust and silence. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to a meeting, answering emails, or fixing something for Amelia. I was just sitting there, free. But freedom, I realized, felt a lot like falling. As I drove through downtown San Francisco toward the Bay Bridge, my mind replayed everything. Every late night, every ignored idea, every moment she'd taken credit for my work. I could still see her smug face in that boardroom. The way she dismissed me like a disposable employee. I should have felt broken. But instead, I felt something else, a spark. Something sharp and calculating beneath the hurt. Because here's the thing, Amelia might have been the CEO, but I knew the company better than anyone. I knew the weak spots, the hidden dependencies, the quiet alliances that kept the wheels turning. I knew where the money was coming from and where it wasn't. And I knew one other thing. The empire she'd built wasn't as stable as she thought. So when I said thank you in that boardroom, it wasn't sarcasm. It was a promise. That night, as I unpacked the small box of my belongings on my kitchen counter, I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder labeled Project Phoenix Reborn. It wasn't new. I'd been building it quietly for months, just in case. What Amelia didn't know was that I'd already started planning my exit long before she pushed me out. And now, she just handed me the freedom to finish what I started. If you've made it this far into my story, thank you. These stories take hours to write and even more hours to relive. So if you want to see how this unfolds, please consider subscribing. It really helps more than you think, especially after living through something like this. Tell me, if your own sister fired you in front of your parents and coworkers, what would you have done? Would you have walked away quietly like I did? Or would you have made a scene? I'm genuinely curious. Let me know in the comments. The sound of my heels clicking against the marble hallway still rings in my memory. It's strange how 5 minutes can stretch long enough to redefine your entire life. Amelia's voice still echoed behind me, calm and cutting, as she dismissed me from the company I helped build. I remember stepping into my office, the one with the view of Market Street, and realizing I had exactly 300 seconds to collect what was left of me. I didn't rush. I took my time. My desk was always neat. Folders lined up, pens capped, nothing out of place. I'd built my career on being meticulous, on noticing details that others overlooked. I wasn't about to let her take that from me too. I opened the top drawer and found a small flash drive I'd tucked behind my organizer months ago. On it were all my personal notes, drafts, and early prototypes of projects that were mine long before they became Amelia's ideas. I slipped it into my jacket pocket. That was the first thing I packed. The second was the photo of me and my parents from the first company launch. I was 26, nervous and proud. Amelia was already in CEO mode, confident, commanding, perfect. Our parents stood between us, beaming. My mother had said that day, "You two make the perfect team." I almost laugh now looking at that photo. Perfect team. Sure. Lauren, the receptionist, peeked into my office again, hesitant. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Sophia, I can't believe she did that." I glanced at her, smiling faintly. "Don't worry about it," I said. It was bound to happen. She looked like she wanted to say more, but I gave her a small nod that meant it's okay to let it go. There was no point in dragging her into the mess. Amelia didn't forgive loyalty to me easily. When I walked out with my small cardboard box, I caught a glimpse of the boardroom through the glass walls. The meeting had resumed without me. Amelia was already talking, gesturing toward a slideshow, her expression bright and controlled. The executives nodded along. My parents still sat near the end of the table, stone-faced. My father's fingers tapped on the surface rhythmically, like he was counting down something. My mother's hands were clasped together tightly. I didn't stay to watch. The elevator doors closed in front of me with a soft chime. As the floors ticked down, 22, 21, 20, I felt lighter. Not happy, not yet, but free in a way I hadn't realized I'd been craving. Every level that passed was like shedding another layer of exhaustion I'd been carrying for years. By the time I reached the lobby, the weight in my chest had started to loosen. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm. People walked briskly along Montgomery Street, phones in hand, coffees in the other, chasing deadlines and deals. For the first time, I wasn't one of them. It was a Thursday morning, bright but cool, with a soft layer of fog rolling over the bay. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the air, trying to decide what to do next. I didn't want to go home yet. Not to that quiet apartment that still smelled faintly of burnt coffee and overwork. Instead, I walked down to a small cafe I liked on Battery Street, the one where I used to stop for espresso before early meetings. The barista, Jenna, recognized me immediately. "Hey, Sophia." The usual, she asked, cheerful as always. I hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Sure, why not? Extra shot today." She didn't notice the way my hand trembled slightly when I took the cup. I sat by the window, watching the reflection of the city move in the glass. My mind was still half in that boardroom, half somewhere else entirely. I replayed everything Amelia had said, every word that cut deeper than it should have. Family hand-me-downs. The phrase looped in my head like static. She'd chosen that wording carefully. It wasn't just about the job, it was a message. She wanted to strip me of more than a title. She wanted to erase my worth. And maybe, for a brief moment, she almost did. But beneath the humiliation was something else, clarity. I realized I had been living Amelia's vision for years, not my own. Every project, every late night, every solution I built had been for her company, her dream. I'd convinced myself that we were partners, but the truth was, I was the foundation she stood on, and she'd mistaken my silence for weakness. By the time I finished my coffee, that clarity had hardened into resolve. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. Amelia had the company, the title, the media spotlight. But I had something she didn't, the respect of the people who actually kept Phoenix Digital running. I knew their frustrations, their loyalty, their limits. And I knew that without me holding the seams together, Amelia's perfect empire had cracks she couldn't see. When I left the cafe, I didn't feel defeated anymore. I felt focused. I took out my phone and opened a note I'd been keeping, one titled Project Phoenix Reborn. It was just a few bullet points and sketches of an idea I'd been shaping quietly for months, back when I first noticed Amelia shutting me out of big decisions. The concept was solid, better even than what we'd been doing at Phoenix Digital. All it needed was time and freedom. And now, ironically, my sister had just handed me both. The next stop I made wasn't planned. I drove down to San Jose, to an old co-working space near the university where I'd first met half our original team. The building still smelled faintly of whiteboard markers and burnt espresso beans. It was quieter now, filled with a mix of freelancers and small startups. I rented a desk by the window, paid for a month up front, and sat down with my laptop. It was the first time in years that my time was mine. I opened my files, connected the flash drive, and began sorting through what I had, drafts, prototypes, research notes. There it was, the framework for a platform I designed but never proposed to Amelia because I knew she'd dismiss it as too small scale. I renamed the folder, Aurora Systems, a new start, a rebirth. Hours passed without me noticing. The sun dipped low, and the sky over the bay turned gold. When I finally leaned back in my chair, I realized I hadn't thought about the humiliation once in hours. I was building again, quietly, steadily, for myself this time. That night, I sent one message before heading home. It was to Daniel, our former senior engineer, who'd left Phoenix Digital a few months earlier after a fight with Amelia. "Hey," I typed, "I'm starting something new. Would you be interested in talking?" His reply came almost instantly, hell yes. I was hoping you'd say that. I smiled to myself, shut my laptop, and sat there in the soft glow of the desk lamp, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. For the first time since that boardroom scene, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was patient, because revenge, I knew, didn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it just had to be better. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of computers and the faint scent of espresso, I understood exactly what freedom felt like. It wasn't walking out of a boardroom. It was walking towards something that was finally yours. For the first few days after Amelia fired me, my apartment in Soma felt unnervingly quiet. I'd wake up at 6 out of habit, expecting the buzz of morning emails, the flood of Slack notifications, the endless ping of responsibility. But the silence that greeted me each morning was both disorienting and peaceful. I'd sit at my kitchen counter with a mug of black coffee, staring out the window at the fog rolling in from the bay, and tell myself this was what freedom looked like. Then I'd open my laptop and remind myself that freedom came with a price tag I hadn't figured out how to pay yet. I spent those mornings in the co-working space down in San Jose, surrounded by the low hum of other dreamers building something from scratch. There was something comforting about that shared struggle. The clack of keyboards, the faint scent of burnt espresso, the soft frustration of people chasing impossible ideas. I'd chosen a desk by the window where the sunlight hit in the late afternoon. It reminded me of my old office, but without the pressure. Daniel showed up 2 days after my message. Same easy grin, same baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "You really did it," he said as he dropped his bag onto the desk next to mine. "You finally left." "I didn't leave," I corrected, smirking. "I was thrown out." He laughed, then grew serious. "Honestly, you're better off. Amelia's been running that place like a dictatorship. Half the dev team's ready to walk." I leaned back in my chair. "Good to know. But let's not talk about her. Let's talk about us." We spent the next 6 hours buried in plans. I showed him the framework I'd been building, Aurora Systems. It wasn't just a software suite. It was a concept built around what Phoenix Digital never managed to get right: scalability for small businesses without the overhead of massive enterprise contracts. It was smarter, cleaner, and most importantly, ethical. Amelia's company had long stopped being about innovation. It was about control and image. Aurora would be about trust. By the time the sun dipped behind the skyline, we had a rough roadmap, a list of potential investors, and a shared understanding. This wasn't just business. It was something deeply personal. That night, as I drove home along Highway 101, I couldn't stop thinking about Amelia. Not with anger, but with this strange mix of nostalgia and resentment. We'd once been inseparable. I used to believe we complemented each other. Her charisma, my focus. But the higher she climbed, the more she pulled away. Somewhere between her third investor round and her first magazine cover, she'd stopped being my sister and started being a brand. I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone when I got home. Pictures from our early days in the garage. Messy hair, greasy pizza boxes, and laughter. We were happy then, working side by side until sunrise. I missed that version of her, the one who'd believed we could build something honest together. But that version of her was gone, buried under money and ego. The next few weeks blurred into a quiet rhythm. Mornings were for building code, afternoons for strategy calls with Daniel and a few other former Phoenix engineers who decided to join. Evenings were for walking the streets of the city, clearing my head. Sometimes I'd pass by the Phoenix Digital headquarters just to look at the building. Shiny, cold, perfect. I wondered if Amelia ever thought about me when she walked those halls, or if I'd already been edited out of her story. One evening, I got a call I wasn't expecting. It was from Mom. "Sophia." "Sweetheart," she said, her voice careful, the way people speak when they're afraid of breaking glass. "Your father and I wanted to see how you're doing." I almost laughed. It had been 3 weeks since the firing, and not a word from either of them until now. "I'm fine," I said. "Busy." "That's good. Amelia mentioned you're moving on," she ventured. I could hear it in her tone. The subtle testing, the loyalty check. Amelia must have told them something. "I am," I said simply. "Working on something new." There was a pause. "She didn't mean to hurt you, you know. It was a business decision." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "Right. Because humiliating your sister in front of your parents and an entire board is just business." "Please don't start," Mom said softly. "You know how your sister is under pressure." That was always the line. Amelia's behavior was excused as ambition. Mine, if I ever pushed back, was labeled sensitivity. "I have to go, Mom," I said finally. "But thanks for checking in." When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long time. The truth was, their silence that day had cut deeper than Amelia's words. Family wasn't supposed to be spectators when you were being torn apart. But maybe that was the moment I finally understood. Family doesn't always mean allies. 2 days later, Daniel and I met with a venture contact I knew from my time at Phoenix, a woman named Priya, who'd once backed one of our early projects. We pitched Aurora to her over coffee in a quiet cafe in Menlo Park. I walked her through our architecture, our purpose, and our plan to pilot with 3 small business clients we'd already lined up. When I finished, she leaned back, studying me for a long time. "You've thought this through," she said finally. "You've also clearly got unfinished business." I smiled slightly. "Maybe. But this isn't about revenge. It's about doing it right this time." Priya nodded. "Good answer." She promised to think about it, but I could see the spark of interest in her eyes. I knew how these conversations went. They always started as maybe and ended as let's talk numbers. That night, Daniel texted me after leaving the workspace. "You realize she's going to hear about this eventually, right?" I replied, "Yeah, I'm counting on it." Because no matter how much I told myself this wasn't about revenge, a small part of me couldn't wait for the day Amelia found out I'd built something better than hers, with the same people she dismissed as replaceable. It wasn't anger anymore. It was quiet purpose. The kind that didn't burn out, it built momentum. One evening, about a month after I'd been fired, I got another call from my parents. But this time, they weren't checking in, they were panicking. "Your sister's in trouble," my father said without preamble. His voice was tight, anxious. "There's a situation at the company. Some major client pulled out, and the press got wind of it. Amelia's asking if you can come by. Just to talk." For a moment, I didn't answer. I stared out the window at the San Francisco skyline, the lights flickering across the water. Part of me wanted to laugh. The irony was too perfect. I finally said, "Tell her I'll think about it." When I hung up, I felt the calm settle over me again. The same calm I'd felt that day in the boardroom when I said thank you. The game was shifting. And this time, I wasn't the one being blindsided. When my father called that night, his voice carried something I hadn't heard in years, worry. Not the kind of worry you feel when you misplace your keys or forget an appointment, but the kind that sits heavy in your chest because something you thought was unshakable is starting to fracture. He said Amelia's company was facing turbulence. That was his word for it, like he was describing bad weather instead of a corporate disaster. I didn't ask for details then. I just listened, waiting for him to say what I already knew was coming. "She's asking if you can come by," he said finally. "Just to talk." To talk. The same people who sat in silence while I was publicly humiliated now wanted me to come back and fix what Amelia broke. It would have been funny if it didn't sting so much. I told him I'd think about it, even though I already knew I wasn't going to rush to her rescue. Not yet. The next morning, I sat at my desk in the co-working space, a cup of coffee going cold beside me, staring at the latest version of Aurora's interface. It was beautiful, simple, intuitive, something that just worked. Daniel was across from me, headphones on, typing furiously. I told him about my father's call, and he paused, looked up, and let out a low whistle. Wow, that didn't take long. I shrugged. She'll spin it as a market shift or a client issue, but if she's reaching out to me, it's serious. He smirked. "You gonna help her?" "I haven't decided." He leaned back in his chair. "You should go. Not for her, for you. See what's happening. See how bad it is." I hated that he was right. Curiosity was a dangerous thing, especially when it came to Amelia. But part of me needed to see it for myself, to know whether the cracks I'd predicted were finally starting to split. That afternoon, I drove to the Phoenix Digital headquarters. The building looked the same from the outside, shiny glass panels reflecting the city skyline, the company's silver logo glinting proudly under the California sun. But inside, the energy was different. The reception area was quieter than usual, the staff moving with a kind of forced composure that told me everything I needed to know. Lauren, the receptionist, looked up the moment I walked in. Her eyes widened slightly. "Sophia." "Hey," I said softly. "Is Amelia in?" She hesitated, then nodded. "She's in her office. You can go up." The elevator ride felt longer than I remembered. When the doors opened onto the executive floor, the smell of expensive coffee and fresh flowers was the same, but the mood wasn't. There was tension in the air, an invisible static that came with fear. I walked past a group of senior staff whispering near the boardroom, their conversation cutting off when they saw me. One of them, a marketing director named Josh, gave me a tight nod. I nodded back but didn't stop. When I reached Amelia's office, the door was half open. I knocked lightly. She looked up from her desk, and for the first time in years, she didn't look untouchable. There were dark circles under her eyes, her posture stiff but brittle. "Sophia," she said, her voice even but softer than usual. "You came." "I said I'd think about it," I replied, stepping inside. The room looked exactly as I remembered, sleek, minimalist, sterile. The wall of awards and magazine covers was still there, each one a monument to her ambition. She gestured for me to sit. "I didn't expect things to get this complicated," she began. "Complicated," I repeated. "That's one word for it." Her eyes flicked up, searching mine. "You've heard." "I've heard something about a client pulling out." "What happened?" She sighed, and for a moment I saw the old Amelia, the one who used to think out loud with me late at night, trying to solve problems together. "We lost the Metrotech contract," she said finally. "They were our biggest client. They said our infrastructure wasn't meeting their needs anymore. They've gone to a competitor." "That's bad," I said evenly, though inside I wasn't surprised. Metrotech had been complaining about lag and downtime for months, but Amelia had dismissed their concerns. "There's more," she said, hesitating. "Some internal files were leaked. The press got hold of them, confidential reports, client feedback. They're saying we've been overpromising on deliverables." I raised an eyebrow. "And have you?" Her jaw tightened. "Every company exaggerates a little in their pitches. It's normal. Not when you get caught," I said quietly. Her expression hardened for a moment, then softened again. "Sophia, I know we haven't exactly been on good terms, but I could use your insight right now. You know the systems better than anyone. Maybe you could take a look, just temporarily." I sat back in the chair, studying her. She looked tired, desperate, even, but she was still Amelia, still trying to frame this as a strategic move rather than a plea for help. "Do you remember the day you fired me?" I asked finally. She blinked, caught off guard. "Sophia, that's not. Do you remember what you said?" I pressed. "You told me this company needed sharper talent, not family hand-me-downs." She flinched just slightly. "That was a mistake. I was under a lot of pressure." I smiled faintly. "And now you're under more." Silence filled the room. For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the muted traffic from outside. "I'll think about it," I said finally, standing up. Her voice followed me as I reached the door. "Sophia, please." That word stopped me. Please. I don't think I'd ever heard Amelia say it to me before. I turned back, meeting her eyes. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I'll be in touch," I said, and left before she could say another word. In the elevator ride down, I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall. There was something surreal about being back in that building, walking the same hallways where I'd spent years trying to prove myself. But this time, I wasn't the same person who'd walked out of that boardroom with a cardboard box. When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit my face and I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even bitter. I was focused. Amelia's empire was crumbling, and now she wanted me to hold it together. But maybe it was time to let it fall. Later that night, Daniel and I sat on the rooftop of the co-working building, the San Jose skyline glittering below us. I told him everything. Amelia's plea, the leaks, the panic. "So, what are you going to do?" he asked. I took a sip of my drink, thinking. "I'm going to help her," I said slowly. Daniel looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "What? After everything she did to you?" I smiled faintly. "I said I'm going to help her. I didn't say I'm going to save her." He laughed softly. "You're scary when you talk like that." "I'm not scary," I said, leaning back against the railing. "I'm just done being the quiet one." As the city lights flickered in the distance, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. Amelia thought I was coming back to clean up her mess. But what I was really coming back for was the truth. The full, ugly truth about how she'd built her empire. And when I found it, I wasn't planning to bury it. Walking back into Phoenix Digital after being fired was surreal. It felt like stepping into a life I'd already mourned and buried. Everything looked the same. Sterile hallways, polished marble floors, minimalist art chosen to project sophistication, but the energy was different. The tension hung in the air like a storm that hadn't broken yet. People spoke in hushed tones, avoided eye contact, and typed furiously as if staying busy could make the disaster outside their control disappear. Amelia had sent me a short, formal message the night before. Thank you for reconsidering. I appreciate it. No apology, of course. Just efficiency, like this was a professional arrangement, not a desperate lifeline. I'd agreed to meet her and the board the next morning to evaluate current systems and identify possible stabilization strategies. Translation: fix what she broke without making her look bad. When I arrived, Lauren at the front desk smiled nervously. Good morning, Sophia. It's good to see you again. Good to see you too, I said with a small smile. How's everyone holding up? She hesitated. Honestly, people are scared. The MetroTech account was 20% of our revenue, and there's talk that a few other clients are considering pulling their contracts. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I figured. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. When the doors opened, I was greeted by the sight of Amelia standing outside the boardroom, her phone in hand, pacing. She looked up when she saw me, relief flickering across her face before she masked it with her usual composure. Sophia, she said, thank you for coming. Let's just see what we're dealing with, I said. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was tense. The executives looked exhausted, their polished suits doing little to hide the stress in their eyes. The CFO, Martin, greeted me with a handshake that lingered a little too long, like he was clinging to the hope that I could somehow pull off a miracle. Good to have you back, Sophia, he said. Temporarily, I corrected. We got right to it. Amelia started by summarizing the crisis. The MetroTech fallout had triggered an internal review, which uncovered inconsistencies in several project reports. Deadlines had been falsified, budget oversights ignored, and client deliverables overstated. The kind of problems I'd spent years preventing, until the day I was removed from the chain of command. I spent the next 2 hours asking questions, taking notes, and watching Amelia carefully. She spoke confidently, but there was something brittle about her tone now. She knew she'd lost control. After the meeting, she led me to her office. You saw what we're dealing with, she said, closing the door behind us. This isn't just bad press, it's structural. The systems are falling apart. I nodded. That's what happens when you replace oversight with ego. Her eyes narrowed. This isn't the time for I told you SOS. Maybe not, I said, but it is time for honesty. She exhaled sharply, walking to the window. You think I don't know that? I've been trying to keep this company afloat while the board circles like vultures. You think they'd hesitate to replace me if they could find someone better? I leaned against the desk, crossing my arms. You mean if they could find someone sharper, not a family hand-me-down? Her shoulders tensed. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then, quietly, she said, I was wrong to say that. I blinked. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the closest I'd ever heard from her. I'm not here to relitigate that day, I said finally. If I'm going to help you, I need access to everything. Internal files, project servers, communication logs, the works. I'm not walking into this blind. She nodded reluctantly. You'll have it. Over the next week, I practically moved back into Phoenix Digital. I stayed late in the office long after everyone else went home, combing through code bases, emails, and contracts. The more I dug, the clearer the picture became. Amelia's empire wasn't just cracking, it was hollow. Layers of neglect, mismanagement, and shortcuts hid beneath the glossy surface. Projects had been rushed out unfinished. Client data had been mishandled. Promises had been made on features that didn't exist. At first, I thought it was incompetence. But then I started seeing patterns, deliberate decisions to mislead, to hide losses, to inflate metrics for investors. And the most unsettling part was that Amelia's name appeared on nearly every approval. One night, around midnight, I was still at my desk when Daniel called. You're still at the office? He asked. Yeah, I said, rubbing my temples. It's worse than I thought. How bad? Bad enough that if the investors find out, the company won't survive a week. There was silence on the other end. Then his voice dropped. Sophia, be careful. If this blows up, Amelia's not the type to go down quietly. I smiled tiredly. I know. After the call, I sat there for a long time, staring at the glowing screen. My folder labeled Aurora Systems was minimized in the corner, my new beginning waiting patiently while I dealt with the remnants of the old one. I opened a blank document and began outlining everything I'd found so far. Not to expose Amelia yet, but to prepare. 2 days later, I handed her my preliminary report. She read it in silence, her face growing paler with every page. "This can't get out," she said finally. I met her eyes. "It already is. You just don't know it yet." Her jaw tightened. "You have no idea what's at stake." "Actually," I said quietly, "I do. I spent years building the systems you're now watching collapse." She looked at me for a long moment, then said softly, "Why are you really here, Sophia?" The question hung in the air. I could have told her the truth. That part of me wanted to understand how everything we'd built together had turned into this mess. That another part wanted to watch her face the consequences she'd so easily handed to me. But instead, I said, "I'm here because someone needs to clean up what's left." That night, as I left the office, I passed by the glass conference room where I'd been fired. The memory flashed, her smirk, the bored silence, my quiet thank you. I stopped for a moment, staring at my reflection in the glass. This time, I didn't see the woman who'd been dismissed. I saw the woman who held all the cards. The guilt-tripping call to action would fit here subtly, between reflection and resolve. So here it is. I've spent hours piecing this story together, reliving every word, every sleepless night, every decision that changed everything. If you've been following this journey, please consider subscribing. It's the only thing keeping me fueled to keep going, and honestly, you'd be surprised how much it helps. When I got home, I opened my laptop and began compiling the files from Phoenix Digital, the emails, the approvals, the discrepancies, all into a single encrypted folder. I labeled it Marble Cracks. It wasn't just evidence. It was insurance. The next morning, I sent Amelia a message, "We need to talk." Alone. Because before this was over, I wanted to hear her say it out loud. The truth behind the empire she'd built on lies. When I told Amelia we needed to talk alone, I didn't expect her to agree so quickly. The message I sent the night before was short and deliberate. No details, no tone. Just 5 words that carried weight she couldn't ignore. She replied within minutes, "Tomorrow, 8 a.m., my office." That morning, the building felt eerily quiet. Maybe it was because the press had started circling, or maybe because the employees had sensed something deeper unraveling. Either way, the tension was palpable. When I stepped off the elevator, Amelia was already waiting by her office window, arms crossed, staring out at the skyline like she could control it if she just glared hard enough. "Close the door," she said without turning around. I did. The moment the latch clicked, she turned. Her face was composed, but I saw it, the flicker of exhaustion, the sharp edge of panic she was trying to bury under professionalism. "You said you wanted to talk," she began. "So talk." I placed a thick folder on her desk. She glanced at it, then at me. "What's this?" "Everything I found," I said. "Emails, approvals, performance reports, the inconsistencies, the fake metrics, all the things you've been signing off on." She frowned. "That's a heavy accusation." "It's not an accusation if it's true." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she sat down slowly, flipping open the folder. Her eyes scanned the first few pages, and I watched the mask start to slip. She tried to compose herself, but her voice cracked when she spoke. "Where did you get these?" "I didn't steal anything," I said. "These are from the internal system you gave me access to. Remember? You wanted my insight." She swallowed hard. "You don't understand. This wasn't about deceit. It was survival." The board was breathing down my neck. Investors were threatening to pull funding. If I didn't show results, they would have replaced me. "So you lied." "I adjusted," she snapped. Then, quieter, I did what I had to. I studied her. There it was, the confession, raw and unguarded. But beneath it, something else. Fear. Not of losing the company, but of losing control. "Do you know what the saddest part of all this is?" I said softly. "You could have asked for help. You had me, Amelia. You always did. But instead, you turned this into a game of power." She slammed the folder shut. "Don't lecture me, Sophia. You think you're better than me because you play things safe, because you don't take risks. But you wouldn't have lasted a month under the pressure I've been under. I met her eyes. And yet, here we are, you breaking, me cleaning up the mess. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't just heavy, it was decades deep. It carried every unsaid word, every rivalry disguised as sisterly competition, every moment where we should have chosen each other, but didn't. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. What do you want, Sophia? Because if you're planning to go public with this, we both lose. I didn't answer right away. I walked to the window, looking down at the city below, the same city where we'd built everything, where I'd once believed we were unstoppable. You want to know what I want? I said, I want the truth. I want you to own what you've done, to stop pretending this was just bad luck. Her reflection in the glass was pale. If this gets out, the company dies. Everything our family built dies. It's already dying, I said. You just don't want to bury it. For the first time, she looked defeated. Her eyes glistened, and she blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall. You think I don't hate myself for it, she said quietly. For what I did to you. For the lies? I do. Every day. I turned to her, caught off guard by the honesty in her voice. Then why did you do it? Her lips trembled. Because I was afraid. You were better than me, Sophia. You always were. You made people listen, not because you demanded respect, but because you earned it. And that terrified me. So I pushed you away before anyone else could see it too. Her words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't an excuse, it was a wound. One that had been festering between us for years. For a long moment, I just stood there, letting the silence settle. Then, quietly, I said, You didn't push me away, Amelia. You broke something that doesn't fix easily. She nodded, tears finally spilling over. Then maybe I deserved to lose it all. Maybe she did. But as much as I wanted to watch her empire collapse, I couldn't ignore what she'd just admitted. It wasn't greed or malice that had driven her, it was fear. And maybe that was even sadder. I'm not going to destroy you, I said finally. But I'm not going to save you either. Her eyes widened slightly. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to finish cleaning up what's left, I said. And then I'm leaving. For good this time. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Sophia. I looked back. I really am sorry. For once, I believed her. But forgiveness wasn't something I could give her yet. Maybe not ever. When I left the building that day, I didn't look back. I walked out into the San Francisco air, the sound of traffic and distant seagulls mixing with the rhythm of my heartbeat. For the first time since the day I was fired, I felt light. That night, Daniel and I met for dinner in a small restaurant in Mountain View. I told him everything, every word, every confession. He listened quietly, nodding occasionally. So, what now? He asked when I finished. Now, I said, we build. We make Aurora everything Phoenix Digital pretended to be. He smiled. You really think you can let her go? I don't know, I admitted. But I think it's time I stop letting her define me. When I got home that night, I opened my laptop and stared at the Aurora interface. It was simple, elegant, alive. For the first time, I realized I didn't just want to compete with Amelia. I wanted to surpass her. Not out of vengeance, but because I finally could. And as I watched the screen glow softly in the dark, I realized something else. Revenge didn't always come from destruction. Sometimes it came from rebuilding. It's strange, though. After everything she said, I couldn't shake one question from my mind. If you were in my shoes, after everything she did, would you still walk away? Or would you make her pay for it all? I'm curious. Tell me what you'd do. It started small, just whispers. A few anonymous comments on LinkedIn, a thread on Reddit claiming Phoenix Digital had massive internal instability, a handful of ex-employees talking about strange accounting. Nothing major, not at first. But like all corporate fires, it didn't need much oxygen to spread. Within a week, it became an inferno. I hadn't been inside Phoenix Digital since that last conversation with Amelia. I'd spent my days focusing on Aurora, finalizing partnerships, tightening our prototype, preparing for a soft launch. But everywhere I went online, the company's name followed me like an echo of unfinished business. Daniel was the first to show me the article. We were in a coffee shop in Palo Alto, surrounded by the quiet hum of laptops and espresso machines, when he turned his screen toward me. The headline hit me like a flashback. Phoenix Digital accused of data mismanagement and financial manipulation. I read the first paragraph twice before speaking. They actually leaked it. Not just leaked, Daniel said. It's trending. The article detailed everything, the falsified reports, the client deceptions, the Metrotech collapse. The writer claimed to have received internal documents from a source close to the executive team. Screenshots, approvals, even email snippets. My stomach twisted as I realized the evidence looked eerily familiar. These are from my report, I said quietly. Daniel frowned. You mean? Amelia leaked them, I said. Or someone on her team did. He blinked. Why the hell would she do that? I stared at the screen. Control. If she releases it herself, she gets to frame the narrative. It's damage control disguised as transparency. The article painted Amelia as a visionary CEO taking responsibility for her team's missteps. It was a masterclass in spin, acknowledging the scandal just enough to appear accountable while quietly deflecting the worst of it onto her subordinates. She'd even included a quote. I accept full responsibility for what happened under my leadership, but I remain confident that with transparency and reform, Phoenix Digital will emerge stronger than before. I could almost hear her rehearsing it in front of the mirror, perfecting that balance between remorse and resilience. For a moment, I felt something between admiration and disgust. It was such an Amelia move, turning a confession into a PR strategy. Daniel watched me carefully. So what do you do now? Step back? Let her burn? I shook my head slowly. No, this isn't over. She's not just trying to survive. She's trying to rewrite the story. Over the next few days, I watched as Phoenix Digital's public relations machine went into overdrive. Amelia did interviews on CNBC and Bloomberg, framing the leaks as part of a necessary reckoning. She promised audits, restructures, and accountability. Investors panicked, but her charisma held them steady for now. Meanwhile, Aurora was ready. Our beta testers were responding better than we'd hoped, and 2 angel investors from San Francisco had expressed serious interest. I was on the brink of announcing our launch when the first message came in. It was from one of Phoenix's senior engineers, a woman named Carla I'd mentored years ago. Carla, Sophia, I can't stay here anymore. It's chaos. Amelia's blaming everyone but herself. People are quitting. If you need talent, I'm in. Then another. Josh, marketing director, heard what you're building. If you're hiring, I'd like to talk. And another. By the end of the week, 5 former Phoenix employees had reached out, all wanting to join Aurora. Not for the money, for the principle. It wasn't revenge. I wasn't recruiting them to hurt Amelia. But as the days went on, it became clear that Phoenix Digital was collapsing under the weight of its own lies, while Aurora was becoming something else entirely, a refuge. The irony wasn't lost on me. Amelia had fired me to keep the company sharp. Now, the sharpest people were leaving her for me. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Part of me wanted to check in, to see how she was handling the chaos. The other part, the wiser one, knew better. She'd made her choices. She'd burned her bridges. And no matter how much I still cared, she needed to face this storm alone. But fate has a way of pulling you back into battles you thought you'd left behind. 2 weeks after the article dropped, I received an email from a private address with no subject line. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. From unknown@securemail.com. Subject. Message. You should see what she's doing next. Board meeting Friday. Check the agenda. You'll want to be there. No signature. No clue who sent it. But the attachment was a scan of a Phoenix Digital board agenda marked confidential. The final item read, emergency leadership vote. My chest tightened. Amelia wasn't controlling the narrative anymore. The board was coming for her. That Friday, I parked a block away from the headquarters. I wasn't supposed to be there. Technically, I didn't even belong in the building anymore. But something about that anonymous message felt personal, deliberate. Someone wanted me to witness what was about to happen. Through the glass facade, I could see the silhouettes of people gathered around the table, the same table where I'd once been humiliated. Now, the stage was set for her reckoning. As the meeting began, flashes from news cameras lit up the street outside. Reporters waited for any sign of movement. My phone buzzed nonstop with updates from social media. Sources confirmed Phoenix Digital may oust CEO Amelia Gray in emergency vote. When the boardroom doors finally opened, Amelia emerged first. Her face was unreadable, her steps measured. Behind her, the board filed out in silence. Then she stopped, looked up, and for a brief second, across the sea of reporters and flashing lights, her eyes met mine through the glass. She didn't look angry. She looked empty. The next headline came minutes later. Amelia Gray removed as CEO of Phoenix Digital following scandal fallout. I sat there in my car for a long time, the city noise fading around me. It should have felt satisfying, poetic even. The mighty had fallen. Justice had, in some strange way, been served. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. I drove home in silence, the glow of the city lights flickering through the windshield. Aurora was thriving. Amelia was finished. The universe had balanced itself. And yet, all I could think about was the look in her eyes. The quiet, wordless acknowledgement that everything we'd built together had finally turned to ash. Maybe that's what real revenge looks like. Not fireworks or a triumph, but silence. The kind that comes when there's nothing left to say. The morning after Amelia's removal, the news cycle was relentless. Every business outlet from the Wall Street Journal to TechCrunch was dissecting the fall of Phoenix Digital, spinning theories about what had gone wrong, who was to blame, and whether the company would survive the week. Her photo was everywhere. Amelia Gray, once Silicon Valley's youngest self-made CEO, now branded as a cautionary tale. I didn't watch any of the interviews. I didn't need to. I'd seen that story play out in real life long before the cameras arrived. Instead, I stayed home that day, sitting by the window of my small apartment in Palo Alto, watching the early morning fog roll over the quiet streets. My laptop sat open on the coffee table, the Aurora dashboard glowing softly. New emails came in every few minutes, investor inquiries, partnership offers, beta tester feedback. Aurora was growing faster than I'd dared hope. But I couldn't shake the heaviness sitting in my chest. Daniel stopped by around noon, bringing coffee and a look of cautious curiosity. "You saw the news?" he asked, handing me a cup. I nodded. "Yeah, it's strange. I thought I'd feel happy." He sat across from me. "You don't." I shook my head. "It doesn't feel like justice. It just feels like an ending." He took a sip of his coffee, studying me. "Maybe that's what it is. Endings don't always feel clean." The truth was, part of me still couldn't believe it was real. Amelia, my sister, my rival, my mirror, was out. After years of clawing her way to the top, she'd been brought down by the very empire she'd built. The board had already announced an interim CEO, a middle-aged finance veteran named Paul Chambers, whose main qualification was not being related to us. The press called it a necessary reset. I called it hollow. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. "Unknown, she's been trying to reach you." Me, who is this? "Unknown, your sister." I stared at the message, debating whether to respond. My first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity and something else I couldn't quite name won out. Me, why not just call me herself? "Unknown, she's not sure you'd answer." I didn't reply, but a few minutes later, another message came in, this time directly from her. "Amelia, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. Please." I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I exhaled and typed tomorrow, 10 a.m., the old cafe. It was the same cafe in downtown San Jose where we'd used to brainstorm late into the night back, when Phoenix was still a dream and we were just two ambitious sisters with laptops and bad coffee habits. When I walked in the next morning, she was already there, sitting in the corner booth. No assistant, no entourage, no expensive power suit, just Amelia, wearing jeans, a plain gray sweater, and a quietness that didn't belong to her. "Hey," I said softly. She looked up, eyes tired but clear. "You came." I said I would. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she gestured toward the seat across from her. "Sit." I did. The smell of coffee and old wood filled the air, and for a second, I could almost pretend it was years ago, before the money, before the boardroom betrayal, before everything fractured. I'm not going to ask you to forgive me, she said quietly. I just wanted to say thank you. I frowned. For what? For not destroying me when you had the chance. I watched her carefully. You really think I could have? She smiled faintly. You already did. You just didn't need to make it public. Silence hung between us. Outside, traffic moved lazily past. Life going on as if the fall of a multi-million-dollar empire was just another Tuesday. She stirred her coffee absently. They offered me a consulting deal, she said after a while. Non-executive. PR damage control. I turned it down. Good, I said. She glanced up. You don't think I can rebuild? I hesitated. I think you could. But maybe you shouldn't, not yet. Not until you figure out why you keep building things that hurt people. That hit her harder than I meant it to. She looked down, nodding slowly. You sound like Dad. I smiled faintly. Someone has to. For the first time in years, she laughed. Quiet, genuine, unguarded. And just like that, I remembered the sister I used to look up to. The one who'd teach me to code, who'd pull all-nighters with me in college, who'd believed we could take on the world together. I lost myself somewhere along the way, she said softly. I think I thought if I kept winning, it would make the fear go away. What fear? I asked. The fear of being ordinary. I didn't know what to say to that. Maybe because I'd felt it too once. The relentless drive to prove that I wasn't invisible. But while she'd fought to stay at the top, I just wanted to build something real. After a long pause, I said, being ordinary isn't the worst thing in the world, you know. She smiled faintly. Says the woman everyone's talking about now. I blinked. What do you mean? Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, there was no rivalry in them, just pride. Aurora. People are calling it the anti-Phoenix. Investors, the press, they love what you're doing. I didn't know what to say. I'd been so deep in the work, I hadn't noticed the ripple effect. I'm happy for you, she said quietly. Really? There was sincerity in her tone that I hadn't heard in years. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't expected. She wasn't my enemy anymore. She was just my sister, flawed, broken, human. When we finally stood to leave, she hesitated, then said, Sophia, if you ever need anything, you know where to find me. I nodded. Take care of yourself, Amelia. We parted ways on the sidewalk, the morning sun breaking through the fog. She walked one direction, I the other. For once, it didn't feel like a competition. It felt like peace. That evening, I sat at my desk, watching the latest Aurora metrics roll in. Our numbers were skyrocketing. I thought about everything it had taken to get here, the humiliation, the anger, the loss, and how, somehow, it had all led to this quiet, steady victory. But the strangest part was, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt ready. Ready to lead differently. Ready to build something that wouldn't need to be burned down, to grow. And as I shut my laptop, I whispered to no one in particular, the crown's never worth it if it costs your soul. Outside, the city lights shimmered, reflecting on the window pane like sparks of new beginnings. The weeks that followed were a blur of motion, momentum, and quiet disbelief. Aurora had gone from a whisper in the tech world to a name that people said with curiosity, even excitement. Articles began appearing on startup blogs and business newsletters. The phoenix that fell and the aurora that rose. They called it poetic, symbolic, a rebirth from the ashes of corporate ego. But to me, it wasn't poetry. It was survival. We'd officially launched our platform out of a small shared workspace in Menlo Park. The first round of investors had signed on, and the first clients had committed to long-term contracts. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking into someone else's building or defending someone else's decisions. This was mine. Every line of code, every hire, every sleepless night, it all carried my fingerprints. Daniel and I worked side by side, often forgetting what day it was. Some nights, we'd crash on the office couches after 30-hour marathons of debugging and coffee-fueled brainstorming. But it wasn't exhausting, it was exhilarating. The kind of work that didn't drain you but filled you. One Friday afternoon, as we finalized a new client pitch, Daniel leaned back and said, "You know, it's crazy. A year ago, you were packing boxes out of Phoenix Digital. Now, you're on the cover of Forbes Tech Weekly." I laughed. "Yeah, I saw that. They called me the quiet architect of the future." He smirked. "You like that?" "It beats family hand-me-down," I said, smiling. He chuckled, then turned serious. "You earned this, Sophia. Every bit of it." His words lingered. Maybe it was because I'd spent so long in the shadows, waiting for someone to notice. But now, I didn't need anyone's validation. I'd built something real, something that couldn't be taken from me in a 5-minute boardroom announcement. Still, success has a strange way of attracting ghosts. About a month after our launch, I got an invitation in the mail. Formal, cream-colored, with gold lettering that looked almost apologetic. It was from Phoenix Digital's board. They were hosting a legacy gala in San Francisco to announce their restructuring and celebrate a new era of innovation. The irony was almost insulting. I tossed the invitation on my desk, fully intending to ignore it. But later that night, as I was closing my laptop, I saw Amelia's name trending on Twitter again. She'd been hired as a consultant for a sustainability startup, quietly, carefully rebuilding her reputation. She wasn't back to her old empire, but she wasn't gone either. She was adapting, and something about that made me pause. The gala wasn't about nostalgia, it was about narrative. They were trying to rewrite history, to make Phoenix Digital look like a phoenix rising again, instead of a company that had burned itself down. Part of me wanted to stay away, but another part, the one that remembered that cold boardroom, the humiliation, the silence, wanted to walk in there and let them see what real rebuilding looked like. So I went. The gala was held at the Fairmont in San Francisco, the kind of event where the champagne costs more than rent and the guests pretend not to be judging each other's net worth. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and polite laughter. When I walked in, conversations paused for a second, just long enough for me to feel the shift in the air. I saw familiar faces, board members, investors, former colleagues. Some smiled cautiously. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Amelia wasn't there, at least not yet. I made my way to the edge of the room, grabbed a glass of champagne, and watched the stage. The interim CEO, Paul Chambers, stepped up to the microphone, delivering a speech full of buzzwords and optimism. "Phoenix Digital has always been a company built on vision," he said. "And today we honor the legacy of that vision while charting a new path forward." Legacy. That word twisted in my stomach. Then, midway through his speech, he paused and gestured toward the audience. "Tonight, we also have among us someone whose innovation represents the very future of our industry. Sophia Gray, founder and CEO of Aurora Systems." The room turned toward me in unison, polite applause echoing like a wave. My cheeks warmed, but I smiled and nodded, pretending composure. Inside, my heart was pounding. When the applause faded, I caught sight of a familiar figure entering through the side door. Amelia. She wore a simple black dress, understated and elegant. Her hair was shorter now, her posture more grounded. When her eyes met mine, she gave the smallest nod, acknowledgement, not challenge. After the speeches ended, she approached me. "You look different," she said softly. "So do you," I replied. "I heard about Aurora," she said. "Congratulations. It's impressive." "Thank you." We stood there for a moment, surrounded by the low hum of music and conversation, two women who'd once shared everything and then destroyed it. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I almost didn't." Her lips curved into a small smile. "I'm glad you did." We talked briefly, nothing deep, nothing dramatic. Just two sisters navigating the strange aftermath of ambition. She told me she was consulting now, doing smaller projects, mentoring young founders. "Trying to build without breaking things this time," she said. "Good," I said, and I meant it. Before she walked away, she paused and said, "You know, Sophia, maybe this was always how it was supposed to end. You building something new. Me learning how to start over." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but I hope it's not the end." She smiled, the kind of smile that carried peace instead of pride. "Neither do I." After she left, I stood near the window, looking out at the city lights. San Francisco glittered like a circuit board, connected, alive, unstoppable. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was standing in anyone's shadow. I wasn't the supporting act anymore. I wasn't the background problem solver. I was the story now, the one I wrote myself. When I got home later that night, I opened my laptop, checked Aurora's metrics one last time, and smiled. The numbers looked good, but more than that, they looked earned. And somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. Still, as I stared at the skyline outside my window, I couldn't help but think about everything that had happened to get here. The betrayal, the downfall, the rebirth. Maybe that's just what growth looks like. Pain turned into purpose. I closed my laptop and whispered, "We're not rising from her ashes anymore. We're rising from our own." It's strange how quiet success can feel when you finally reach it. There's no confetti, no cinematic moment of triumph, just the soft hum of your own thoughts in a room that used to feel too big and now feels exactly right. It had been nearly a year since the day my sister fired me. A year since I'd walked out of that glass-walled boardroom with 5 minutes and a box full of memories. And now, as I sat in Aurora's new headquarters overlooking downtown San Jose, that moment felt like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to someone else. The office wasn't extravagant. Clean white walls, warm lighting, plants in every corner, and an open floor plan that invited laughter and ideas instead of tension and fear. My team worked late that night, music playing softly in the background, the air alive with energy. They weren't just employees, they were believers. Daniel was leaning against the doorframe, watching me review a new product proposal. "You realize tomorrow's the anniversary?" he asked. I looked up. "Of what?" He smiled knowingly. "You know what?" I leaned back in my chair, a small laugh escaping me. "Yeah, I guess it is." He stepped inside. "You've come a long way, Sophia. From getting fired in front of 20 people to running one of the fastest growing startups in the Bay Area. If that's not poetic justice, I don't know what is." I smiled faintly. "It's justice, maybe, but not revenge." He tilted his head. "You sure about that?" "Revenge ends things," I said quietly. "This feels like the beginning." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I get that." As he left, I turned back to my screen, but my focus drifted to the small glass paperweight sitting beside my keyboard. It was the only thing I'd kept from my old office at Phoenix Digital, a simple orb of clear glass with gold flecks suspended inside. Amelia had given it to me on my first day there. "For when you build something that lasts," she'd said. I hadn't touched it since the day I left, but tonight I picked it up, turning it in my hand. The gold inside caught the light, glowing like tiny embers. It reminded me of how fragile things can be, how easily beauty can shatter if you hold it too tightly. My phone buzzed. A message from Amelia. "Amelia, happy 1 year. I thought you might like to know. The board voted to dissolve Phoenix Digital. They're liquidating what's left." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back. "Me, thank you for telling me." A moment later, another message appeared. "Amelia, you did it right, sophomore. I'm proud of you." For a long time, I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. Some wounds don't heal with words, they heal with time, with distance, with quiet understanding. Outside the window, the lights of San Jose glowed against the dark sky, each one representing a life, a dream, a story. I thought about how much had changed, how much I had changed. For years, I defined myself by what I did for others, by how well I could hold everything together. Now, I define myself by what I chose to build for myself and who I chose to become in the process. Aurora had become more than a company. It was a statement, a living, breathing example of what happens when you stop waiting for permission to be seen. A few days later, I got an email from Forbes Tech asking if I'd contribute an article to their reinvention issue, an essay about leadership, resilience, and second chances. I hesitated at first, unsure if I wanted to reopen old wounds. But then I realized it wasn't about reopening them. It was about showing they'd healed. So I wrote. I wrote about the boardroom silence, about the weight of being underestimated, about how revenge doesn't have to look like destruction. It can look like evolution. I wrote about the importance of walking away not to escape, but to rebuild something stronger. When the article went live, it spread fast. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was honest. I received hundreds of messages from readers, employees, founders, even CEOs who'd been through their own versions of betrayal and rebirth. People who'd lost everything and started again. That night, I sat alone in my office, rereading some of those messages. There was a deep peace in knowing that my story had helped someone else find the courage to stand up. Maybe that was the real victory, not proving Amelia wrong, but proving myself right. As I gathered my things to leave, I glanced once more at the paperweight, now glowing softly under the lamplight. For the first time, I didn't see it as a reminder of what was lost, but of what was built afterward. I slipped it into my bag and turned off the lights. Walking out into the cool night air, I thought about the long, winding road that had led me here, from the humiliation of being let go to the quiet triumph of standing tall on my own terms. Maybe that's what it means to come full circle. Not to return to where you started, but to finally understand why the journey had to begin the way it did. I paused at the edge of the parking lot, looking up at the stars scattered across the California sky. Somewhere out there, Amelia was finding her own way back, just as I had. And for the first time in years, I hoped she made it. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about freedom. The freedom to choose who you become after the fire. I smiled, whispered to myself, here's to new beginnings, and walked away without looking back. If you were in my shoes, would you have walked away or stayed to fight? I'd love to hear what you'd do in the comments. And if you made it all the way to the end, thank you. Stories like this take hours, sometimes days, to write, and your support keeps them alive.